Happy Friday. Thanks for being with us tonight on a day that felt like the kind of news day that only happens in the movies. The first headlines to cross this morning were about a jewel heist in France, specifically at the Cannes Film Festival. Hundreds of thousands of dollars in jewels, all stolen from a hotel safe. There were initial reports that the jewels might have been things that movie stars were planning to wear at the film festival, but now it seems like that is maybe less likely. A professional gang of jewel thieves who are known as the Pink Panthers have hit this area in France in recent years. Police say they do not think this particular heist looks like the work of the Pink Panthers, but they are not ruling them out yet. And no, that is not my dog. Then this evening, also at Cannes, shots of some kind, were fired during a live TV broadcast at the festival, which sent the audience and movie stars running for cover. Police arrested a man in possession of a fake grenade and a starting pistol, so a thing that looks like a gun and can make a sound like a gun, but it does not fire real bullets. The police's initial statement about the guy they arrested is that he seems to be, quote, a crazy guy. Don't get mad at me for saying crazy. That's what the police said in France. Also today, reports of a video that appears to show the mayor of the fourth largest city in North America smoking crack. This is a photo supplied by the people who are selling the video. Gawker.com was the first source to break the news. Their editor saying he traveled to Toronto after he was approached to buy the crack-smoking mayor videotape. The Gawker editor says he did see the tape. He says he is sure that it is the mayor in the tape, but he did not buy the tape. The price was too high. But nevertheless, he wants you to know it exists. So the news is kind of like that today, right? Even before you get to today's details in the Silvio Berlusconi trial in Italy, where some of the prostitutes at his bunga bunga parties were allegedly paid to dress up like President Obama for whatever reason. Yeah, it's just that kind of day in the news. But in Washington today, it is still scandal o'clock all day long. Today we saw the guy who was just forced out at the IRS grilled in a congressional hearing about the tax agency using conservative-sounding political keywords to single out applicants for special scrutiny. The Inspector General at the Treasury, who investigated the scandal in the first place, said today that he did tell two higher-ups at Treasury last June that he was going to be doing this investigation into how the conservative groups were treated. He told the Deputy Treasury Secretary and he told the General Counsel at Treasury that he was starting this inquiry into whether conservatives were being unfairly singled out. He says he told them he was starting the inquiry, but obviously not what the inquiry had found, since he hadn't found anything yet because he was just getting started. Republicans have seized on this news today, though, because of the timing, saying it is important that there were administration officials outside just the IRS itself who knew before the election that there was at least a potential problem with the IRS targeting conservative groups. Shouldn't that have been disclosed publicly? Could that have become a salient issue in the election had the administration disclosed that that investigation was underway before everybody voted? So that's what happened today in today's hearing on the IRS scandal. Don't worry, in case you missed today's hearing on the IRS scandal, there will be many more. There will be endless hearings on this, at least it seems. The next ones are already scheduled for Tuesday and Wednesday of next week. This is the new story that the Republicans and even the Democrats this time are going to make their obsessive 24-hour-a-day investigative reason for living from here on out. And they have time to do that in part because the other scandal that the Republicans have been obsessing on and trying to wring for all it's worth for months now has kind of fallen apart in the last few days. More specifically, it's actually just taken a really hard turn in the past few days. It was this time last week when the Benghazi scandal finally crossed over into a mainstream concern, right? Instead of just fueling all caps, exclamation point, misspelled fundraising chainmail letters on the right. It was this time last week when ABC News finally blew this story wide open. And when I say they blew this story, I mean seriously, they totally blew it.
Now to the White House, challenged today during a leadership crisis. A crisis about what the president did on Benghazi, and we're talking about 8 months ago when 4 Americans died. ABC's chief White House correspondent Jonathan Call broke the story that created a storm today.
You know, he did create a storm. The ABC report on Friday caused all 3 network newscasts to report on the scandal of Benghazi. It's not just for Fox News anymore and talk radio. It's ABC News and CBS News and NBC News. It's all of cable news. That was Friday. And then Sunday morning, oh boy, it was all 4 Sunday morning talk shows. ABC and NBC and CBS and Fox News Sunday, all leading with Benghazi. Wow, thanks, Jonathan Karl. Thanks, ABC. Now this is the biggest story in the country because of these damning emails that ABC News said it had obtained.
Saying in an email obtained by ABC?
Obtained by ABC. This is ending up being the key point there. An email obtained by ABC? ABC said overtly that they had obtained these damning White House emails. And then in their reporting, which again blew this whole story into a national mainstream news story for the first time ever, which has taken a week to even start to dissipate, ABC printed what they said were direct quotations from these emails that they said they had obtained. We now know that ABC had not obtained emails because the emails they were supposedly directly quoting from were actually obtained by other reporters and then published publicly as part of a big document dump by the White House. ABC bizarrely decided to update their story but not correct it. They decided not to apologize for it or retract this false thing that they published. What turns out to be the most interesting question in all of this, besides when the heck is ABC going to correct this, the most interesting question in all of this turns out to be, well, if ABC was not quoting real White House emails, they said they were quoting real White House emails, they were not. What were they quoting? And now it turns out we can piece that together from all of the other news agencies trying to reverse engineer this disaster, this false story that went totally wrong this week. What is now apparent is that the same cooked up false account of something that was supposedly said and done by White House officials in the aftermath of Benghazi, that false account was written by what various reporters describe as congressional and Republican sources. Hey, I think I found the actual scandal. This is how NBC put it. Congressional sources discussed with NBC News a report compiled by House Republicans that examines a series of emails concerning when and how talking points were crafted about the Benghazi attacks. That itself, congressional sources discussed with news agencies, a report compiled by House Republicans, that kind of sourcing itself is not a scandal. This becomes a scandal when we learn subsequently that that report that was given to reporters was a false report. It made up something that the White House supposedly did that the White House did not do. And they shopped that false report to ABC News, and ABC News bought it hook, line, and sinker. They published it as an exclusive. And all the Beltway media and all the national media and everybody in politics jumped because now this finally seemed like a scandal. Oh, that's what the right has been so upset about. But the scandalous part of it was this idea that the White House got in right after the Benghazi attacks happened and started bigfooting the whole process to make sure that the State Department would look good. That's the scandal. That's what was supposedly this big bombshell that ABC broke on Friday. And that scandal that the White House weighed in the talking points to make the State Department look good, that did not happen. That only happened in the cooked-up dossier that Republicans in Congress wrote themselves that they said was the work of the White House, and then they shopped it to the press. And yeah, part of the scandal here is a press scandal. You know what? When you get used like this and you end up publishing false information, false quotes, you have to correct it. But the bigger scandal here is not a process matter. It's not a press matter. It is this very stark fact that somebody in Congress right now, or somebody working for somebody in Congress right now, a staffer, concocted a big lie to try to make the White House look very desperately bad on this Benghazi scandal that they otherwise have not been able to get traction with. Who told the lie? I have a note to my journalist pals who got involved in this scandal. If your source lied to you, they are not actually a source. They are a con artist, and you are their victim. It means you don't have to protect them anymore. They're not a source. When you get lied to, when you are a tool of somebody else's deception, when you get lied to, the person lying to you is no longer a source. They are Lied to you is itself news, and you can report that news. Republican congressional offices shopped a false dossier as if it was White House emails. That is a story. The office and the staffers and the members of Congress maybe who did that, that is news. And if you know who it is, you can say so. The other thing I would say to my friends in the media on this is that it is okay to say that you got something wrong. I mean, it sucks to say you're wrong. But if you are wrong, it is better to say you're wrong than to not say you're wrong and just hope it all goes away. Look, I can prove it. It sucks, but you can say sorry. Okay, Department of Corrections. I made an error on last night's show. It's very embarrassing. I regret the error. We have a correction to make. I had no idea I made this. Apparently, I'm now an old person. Correction, I screwed up, and I'm sorry. It is awful and horrible, but you can just do it. This show has been on the air for almost 5 years now, knock on wood, right? And in that time, we've gotten some stuff wrong. One of those ones that we just played the little clip from was me screwing up barrels versus gallons when we were doing a story about oil. Now, that is freaking embarrassing. I mean, a barrel's really, really big, right? A gallon you can like pick up with one hand. Yes, I screwed that up, right? But you know what? You guys screwed up on this Republican Benghazi scam ABC thing. You screwed up something way bigger than that. You have to fix it. You put it in quotes. It was not a quote. You have to fix it. You have to correct it. So that's the status. That is the state, basically, of Washington scandal today. But at times like this in our politics, sometimes it feels like the individual circumstances of each individual scandal unfolding through each individual hearing, they feel like those individual circumstances matter less than the overall momentum that comes with Washington. You can feel it clicking over into scandal mode, right? Like, hold on, we're going into a tunnel. Things are about to look very different. Once you are in scandal mode, it's like if you have a four-wheel drive vehicle. Remember how it used to be? And sometimes it still is in some vehicles. You have to click over into locked hub four-wheel drive low. Locked hub four-wheel drive low is great for getting yourselves out of really sticky situations, churning through really deep mud on a very slow speed. But if you do actually want to proceed on pavement toward transporting yourself somewhere, four-wheel low is not actually going to get you there. That's kind of where we are right now. We're in scandal mode. Does the Obama administration have a way of getting itself out of scandal mode? Or is this essentially indefinite, if not permanent now? Does the Obama administration need to get Washington out of scandal mode? Or is there some way in which they might see this as not necessarily all bad for them? And has Barack Obama, the man, or Barack Obama, the politician, even before he was president, ever been through a period like this in his life? In his personal or political history, has he ever been through this type of trial? Does his past tell us anything about what might happen next? Joining us now is David Axelrod. He's former senior advisor to President Obama. He's now director of the Institute of Politics at the University of Chicago, and he's MSNBC's senior political analyst. Mr. Axelrod, thank you for being here.
Good to be here. I'm all nostalgic listening to this recounting of the week. I'm missing Washington so much.
Yeah, I bet. Well, you have known President Obama for a long time. You've been with him through a lot of his political career. Has he ever been through a very difficult, sort of multifaceted period like this, either personally or politically? Have you seen him through periods like this before?
Oh, yes. In fact, I've experienced them with him. First of all, understand, we went through a whole campaign in 2007 and 2008, principally 2007, in which the whole Washington establishment was writing us off as incompetence. Then during the presidency, we've had these episodes. When I watched the news this week, I was getting flashbacks to that week in the spring of 2010 when the oil leak erupted in the Gulf Coast. And you remember it, Rachel. It was the president isn't passionate enough, didn't move quickly enough. His staff is all a bunch of idiots, He ought to get rid of them. This is Obama's Katrina. It's the defining event of his presidency. Will he ever recover from this? And I must say, I don't think there was one mention of the oil leak during the whole 2012 campaign. But Washington tends to get itself into a tizzy, and every event is treated as if it's the defining event, at least for the number of hours or days that it goes on for, and then the town moves on to its next obsession. And I suspect that is what's going to happen here. This will play out. We will come out of it. And I don't think any of these things are going to a lasting defining impact. I think the danger of it is just that it eats up time, and when you're in your second term, every day is precious and trying to get some things done, and when the town is spinning itself on all of these faux scandals, it takes up time.
Is there anything strategically that you think the administration is likely to do or ought to be doing to try to stop burning up so much time, to try to make sure this period's as short as possible?
You know, I actually think that they did some smart things this week. I think, you know, getting those emails out quickly this week, reintroducing the Media Shield Act, you know, acting quickly in terms of dismissing the director of the Internal Revenue Service and initiating, you know, a process of review. I think those things are all important and valuable. In fact, and you know, the thing that is also worth reviewing here is there are serious issues behind each of these questions. It's just not what anybody's talking about. There's no doubt that Benghazi was a great tragedy and a tragic series of missteps and errors that led up to it in terms of the safety of those people. Nobody ever dismissed that. In fact, the State Department, the review board, issued a scathing report on this. And so the question is, what can we do? Are we going to devote more resources to protecting the embassies? On the IRS, are we going to examine not just what happened and why, but how are we going to deal with these 501c4s, these entities that are so hard to define as to whether they're political or not? I happen to believe a lot of them are political, and maybe they don't warrant the treatment they get from the Internal Revenue Service, although that should be examined across the board. I've been pleased to see on the AP story that we now have a lot of born-again defenders of freedom of the press, and we'll see if that carries through to actually voting for a media shield law. But if that's what comes from this, that will have been positive. But none of that is what's really being discussed right now. It's, you know, the scandal mania is astride Washington, and that just has to burn itself out.
In terms of how quickly it's going to burn itself out and whether or not new revelations are going to continue to keep this going on, today it seems like the most salient thing that emerged from that hearing about the IRS scandal was this idea that the Inspector General had notified higher-ups at Treasury, so outside the IRS, at the Treasury agency, that they were looking into this question about whether conservative groups were mistreated in the application process by the IRS. They'd known, and they knew before election season. Does that not open up you guys from the campaign and the administration to the charge that you should have let that be publicly known then, that investigation was underway? It might have had a really big effect on the election because it would have upset people, as we see now.
Well, first of all, speaking for someone who was at the campaign, I didn't know anything about that when it was going on. And, you know, one of the things about this, Rachel, is when you look at how utterly asinine it was that they were doing what they were doing. I mean, it made sense from a technical standpoint that, you know, a lot of these organizations sprung up in the middle of the election, and so it was fair to surmise that perhaps they weren't really social welfare organizations. But just from a political standpoint, it was ludicrous to do what they did, and it's prima facie evidence that nobody political was exercising any judgment in there. But in terms of your question, I assume that the people who were told were awaiting the results of the review and were ready to act on the review. I don't know that it would have had a great impact on the election to know that this was going on. These questions were swirling around. Maybe it would, but I suspect it would have just energized people who were already energized to oppose the president. Truth is, you know, as I move around the country, I don't know that all of this is kitchen table talk for anybody out here in America. It may be in Washington. Obviously, people are concerned about manipulation of the IRS for political purposes, if that's what happened. But you have an Inspector General who testified today that that's not what happened. That's not what he believed happened. And so, you know, I do think that, yes, this will churn. I think there's a danger for the Republicans that if they overplay it, a lot of folks out here for whom this isn't kitchen table talk are going to say, when are they going to get to do to stuff that actually matters to us?
Right.
When are they going to deal with some things that have some consequence in our lives?
Weren't we going to get to immigration this time? Weren't we going to get to the gun background checks? Weren't we going to get to
Yeah, not to mention economic issues like the budget.
Absolutely. David Axelrod, former senior advisor to President Obama, now MSNBC senior political analyst. Thanks for being with us on a Friday, David. Really
Always
appreciate it.
nice to be with you, Rachel. Thank you.
Next, I will talk about a man wearing a strange wig in a completely legitimate news context. Not only because it's Friday, but because it is the Friday of this week, and this is the kind of week when wigs in the news ended up being normal. Yeah, that's next.